Players Planet. See it in the papers, you read it every day. The riots and the fire going on in South LA. The muggers and the government, they're all wanting the same thing. They take all your money, whatever else spring. Well, I don't think I understand why we're making such a fuss. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. Take me. And I don't think I understand what's come of all of us. And I don't think I understand why we take this world for granted. I just want to get right back to Guitar Players Planet. 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 Guitar Players Planet.
Down by the water, maybe out the sun, maybe out the door when the music man calls. That's when I gotta play. For the things we never had, I'm burning with hate, with love. Spin around, round. 'Cause as a boy I had a dream. Carry it with me today. Yes, I do. Well, the walls come
Sunny skies, the smell of palm tree air. Looking back, I could never feel fair. The way the music has touched my soul, the way that the South holds its control. But I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to the lands of the new. Oh, na 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 na. Seems to me that I have lost my old friend. Got the sunset on the highway again. Then I get lost on a long summer day. I must go back before it's too late. You're afraid, you're feeling alone. Time and space can never unfold. The holidays can ring in your fear. The ghostly embrace can only mean tears. And I've got a new way to choose. I'm gonna start running back to the lands of the blue. Oh, na 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 na. Sitting at the lake, I'm feeling confused, but I had my guitar, so I played this blues. But I'm afraid, the war might be true, that I might never be back again. Seems to me that I have lost my old friend. Got the sunset off the highway again. Then I get lost on a long summer day. Must be back before it's too late. Before it's too late.
Someone to take me down at night. Someone to make my day. New revelation fills my soul. Oh, I can waste away. You distracting my attention. You're all that's on my mind. You not looking for perfection, but you're too hard to find. Now the first night is coming, and I know what to do. You know that nothing feels sweeter than someone new. Where did my color go? Got your head in the sand. You can't be in control, using a powerful hand. I wanna be you, I wanna see you. Don't taste the kisses of hate. Don't try to tell me, don't try to sell me, don't try to say it's too late. You're gonna push me to the edge, back me in a corner, making me stand in your shoes. Push me to the edge, hide a little color, it's black and white and blue. Black and white and blue, yeah. All right. Cat learns to ring a bell. Rockets free from the maze. We can be taught to love. We got to learn a new way. I wanna see you, I wanna be you. Don't taste the kisses of hate. Don't try to tell me, don't try to sell me, don't try to say it's too late. Yeah, you're gonna push me to the edge, back me in a corner, making me stand in your shoes. Push me to the edge, add a little color, it's black and white and blue. Black and white and blue, yeah. I wanna see you, don't taste the kisses of hate. Don't try to tell me, don't try to sell me, don't try to say it's too late. Push me to the edge, back me in a corner, making me stand in your shoes. Push me to the edge, add a little color, it's black and white and blue. Yeah, black and white and blue. You're gonna black and white on the edge, back me in a corner, making me stand in your shoes. Push me to the edge, add a little color, it's black and white and blue. Black and white and blue.
right, how's it going, everybody? We are live on a Saturday. Let me get rid of this bug up there next to Eric's head. There we go.
Thank you.
And how's it going, everybody? We are here on a Saturday afternoon with Chris Woodhouse coming to us all the way from the UK. And it's great to have him on and give us a lot of insight on astrophotography and how kind of things work. Al, how you doing?
Yeah.
Feel free, anybody who's hanging out with us, to go in the chat and give Chris any questions that you may have. But in the beginning, of course, we have to do our little spiel for all of our members and our guests and our sponsors. So let's do that really quick. And let me get rid of that. And there we go. So thank you all to our sponsors for sponsoring AstroWorld. That allows us to do all these wonderful things. Two of our sponsors are Woodland Hills Camera and Telescopes and Night Skies Network. Woodland Hills Camera and Telescopes give us $50 gift certificates, which we give away one a month until the end of the year. So if you're not involved in any of these giveaways, go to our website and sign up for them at astroworldweb.com. Our other Red Giant level sponsors, Prima Luce Lab, Camera Concepts, Optolong, all of who are actually, with the exception of Camera Concepts, are at AIC this weekend. So, and being promoted over at Prima Luce Lab is the Eagle for Ecclesi, which is a giveaway that they have given us. It's a Eagle 4 Pro made specifically for AstroWorld. It's matte black with red lettering and maxed out. 64 gig of RAM, 2 terabytes solid state drive. It's a Samsung 980 Pro. It's totally maxed out. Wi-Fi 6, Windows 11. It's done. So that's going to be awesome. So get a hold of that giveaway. And our Masters of PixInsight and IP for AP at the Supergiant level, we give away year subscriptions to IP for AP and Masters of PixInsight free classes, which the next class is going to be this Tuesday, the 24th at 7 p.m. Photons to Photos number 4. That will be going over processing of M13 from beginning to end. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And also, we can do this all with all our member sponsors on Patreon and YouTube. So thank you to our 2 Black Hole member, John and Bob, followed by all of our Red Giant members and our main sequence members. And if you'd like to become a member and get all the perks with the t-shirts and the hats and all that good stuff, feel free to become a member sponsor on our Patreon site. I'll throw the Patreon link in the chat in a little bit. But thank you to all of our people and helping support the channel. So thank you so much. And our Protostar members, Kieran and Greg, thank you as well. Today, we have Chris Woodhouse, author of Capturing the Universe and the Astrophotography Manual, amongst others. He is going to be with us talking about astrophotography and what he's got going on. Last night, if you missed it, we had Maxi Falieres from Argentina, who is an astrophotographer, talking to us about iPhone astrophotography. It's not even iPhone, but cell phone astrophotography, which was really, really fun. And on the 25th, we have Kurt Lanes coming up, who's an astrophotographer and a DIYer who made his own roll-off roof. So he's going to be going over that. That's going to be a lot of fun. And of course, join us on our other social media platforms. We just hit our 60th member on the Discord channel. So thank you to, I believe it was Cindy, I think, if I remember right. I think I was Cindy on the Discord channel, being our 60th member. Thank you. And we're on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So thank you to everybody for supporting the channel. And without further ado, let's go to the live. And we'll get why does the bug keep on popping up? There we go. And we are here and we have Chris. So Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming to join us on a Saturday evening by you, Saturday afternoon by us. And why don't you introduce yourself to the group and see what's going on?
Okay, doke. So
Can you just confirm you can see my screen?
Yep, and I'll make it nice and big for you.
Okay, so good. Let's think. It's good afternoon, everybody, and it's early evening here. So I thought I'd do a little bit of talk about things that are interesting me at the moment. My life in astrophotography is a constant struggle of bad weather, bad equipment, and so forth. So I thought I'd do a little bit about me, just so you know who I am, where I'm coming from. And then the two main topics I thought I would look at today was imaging on a budget, and introducing some new gizmos, some of which you may already be aware of. I've thrown in some pictures along the way in no particular order, just to sort of break it up a bit. So there's some eye candy as well as information on the notorious PowerPoint slides, except
Awesome.
This is a Mac, so PowerPoint doesn't have a place on my Mac. It's been relegated. So anyway, without further ado, let's move on and talk a little bit about myself. So I'm a professional engineer. I've retired fairly recently from Ford Motor Company, but in my own time, I used to design electronics for darkrooms, which is up here, and I patented and sold, and they still sell things for the darkroom, which, believe it or not, sell in the same numbers as they did 20 years ago. On the back of that, I wrote 2 books on monochrome photography, very similar to the style that Ansel Adams used to write about, the same type of technology. And this one on the right here is still sold by Focal Press, and it gets good reviews. And then as digital came along and made darkrooms more or less obsolete or environmentally unfriendly, I thought, what can I do with a digital camera that nobody else is doing? So I pointed it upwards and started to learn about the subject. I realized there was a golden opportunity to write down all the trials and tribulations and what I did about it as I went along. So I wrote the astrophotography manual about 8 years ago, and followed up with a second edition because the technology is moving that quickly. And more recently, 2019, I think, I did a slightly, not beginner's book, but a one that starts off a little bit slower rather than go into the deep end. For the reason being that when you looked at the books around in 2010, most of them are sort of talking about film SLRs. Some were talking about some very ancient CCDs, or the one that amused me was there was one on low-cost astrophotography, and on the front cover was a rotating dome observatory, which I thought, that isn't really with a Takahashi in it. So that didn't really jive with me. So if there wasn't something in the market, I thought I'd try and write my own. So I'm located just northeast of London. So my light pollution is not great, but I doubt it's as bad as you have in New York. I'm in a rural town, and I had someone build me a roll-off roof observatory, which just simply has a motor at the side of it. And you'll be interested to know that because of my electronics background, I wrote my own Arduino controller for it and my own ASCOM driver, and it's been running successfully unattended all the nights for the last 3 or 4 years without a hitch.
Nice. That's awesome.
I put the code on the website which supports the books, and a couple of people have used my software and done their own, which is nice to know. The weather is the biggest problem in the UK. A friend of mine who's got an observatory in Spain gets 240 clear nights a year. I'm lucky if I get 24 imaging nights a year. So that's the real problem, and that's why I had to have a roll-off roof observatory, because if I can take a quarter of a night, I will, simply because it may be 2 weeks before I get the next clear night. So a lot of
what kind of telescope is that you have in your observatory?
That's a 10-inch Ritchie Cretin. I've sold that now. It was okay, but I prefer refractors. They're more convenient.
Sure.
the trouble is they lose their collimation all the time, and you're always fiddling around with them.
Yep.
And the resolution, strangely, is not as good as you think it is. Even though it's only a 10-inch reflector, the resolution is probably the same as my 6-inch refractor.
Wow.
Simply because the central obstruction, but also because the sky's the limit in terms of resolution.
Sure.
Which is something that people forget about when they buy big instruments, that you need to be in a place where the air is really stable. So, yeah, it's challenging. And a lot of what I've done in the past is simply because I need to make the most of what I've got and not fall over. I haven't got the luxury of wasting nights trying to debug things. They have to work. So a lot of what I do is about reliability, and that's probably the most important characteristic of anything I buy is it reliable? So one of the images on one of the books, this was done in the back garden. It was about 50 hours. If I was doing it from a dark site, I could probably do it in a quarter of that time. And as with a lot of people from light polluted areas, a lot of my work tends to be in narrowband to get around the light pollution. So this was done on an old-fashioned.
I don't think we're able to see the image of your next slide there, Chris. I'm sorry.
Oh,
we just didn't see your back garden backyard slide. Okay, we got it now. There we are.
It's taking a time to flip. Okay.
It wasn't for a second. It just might have been a glitch in your in your internet. That's okay.
So yeah, this is a sort of a standard Hubble palette with a few modifications. And my biggest challenge, which I think is a challenge for a lot of people, is when your atmosphere is not really crystal clear. It doesn't really matter how good the optics are. You always get those bright stars bloating out. And you do your level best to get the star sizes small, but I've never quite managed it. And it's not the optics. It's just simply diffraction and diffusion through the atmosphere, through the dust. So anyway, on to the subject in hand, imaging on a budget. And I thought we'd take a look at software, because if anything's changed in the last 10 years, it's definitely software, and entirely for the better, I think. So if I go back to 2010, when I first started, you've got what I call the cash cows. So you've got Windows, which is fairly cheap at 150 bucks. Maxim DL5. Yes, anyway, you get the idea that all these bits of software were quite expensive to start with. A lot really were quite cheeky and asked for a yearly subscription to do not a great deal. And in actual fact, often wanted you to just buy the next level of software rather than update it.
Chris, I think your screen is stuck again.
Oh,
there we go.
It's
now
just
it's
taking
back.
what? Okay,
yeah,
so it's taking about 15 seconds.
Yeah, it looks
okay,
like it's
so
taking...
I'll flip slides. I'll flip slides about 20 seconds before I talk to them.
There you go.
That's pretty fun.
So right now you're on the cash cows.
Yeah. So all these will probably be familiar to you. The one that really used to get me was ACP, because it was like $900 per computer.
Yeah.
And yeah. I don't rate ACP personally. It fried one of my friends' computers. It actually destroyed their BIOS.
Wow.
But yeah, it's not written particularly robustly in my opinion. But anyway, but we've all been there, and the point is that was then, and now what's now. So if I move on and tell me when the imaging comes up, there's even in 2010, there were free utilities. So just give me a bell when it pops up.
Sure.
Gosh, it is a lag, isn't it?
Yeah, it might be the overseas.
Well, it's very high resolution, so it just might be bandwidth.
It could be. It could be.
Yeah, it could be.
I just need to make sure my wife isn't watching a movie or something. Hang on a sec. I'm serious. Just give me 10 seconds.
You got it.
Oh yeah, no problem. No problem.
That's funny.
Carol,
still hasn't moved yet, though.
I'm back.
Yeah, it
No,
still hasn't moved
sometimes you can't control when your computers do updates, and it could be one of the computers trying to do, update the iOS or something. So in 2010, you had a few Windows freebies, PhD,
It just
autofocus in
it
the
just switched now, so it's about a minute.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to switch again and talk to this.
There you go.
And hopefully you'll see the others. So you had a couple of utilities. You had a few planetariums. You had ASCOM. You had image stackers, and there was a free photo editor called GIMP.
Sure.
And mostly written in Virtual Basic and a bit in C. But if you go on 12 years, the depth and choice of the utilities, free utilities, has grown greatly in all different sorts of languages. You've got Python, JavaScript, C#, C++, you name it. And not only just the number of utilities, but also the operating systems they work on. So typically in 2010, it was mostly Windows, and now you've got Linux and Mac as well. You've got image capture in there, you've got sequencers, you've got weather monitors, you've got astrometry, more planetariums and planners, and then you've got the different protocols. In addition to ASCOM, you've got Indy, Indigo, and Alpaca.
Yep.
You've also got free photometry. So I'm going to click again and keep on talking, which is going to be interesting because I've got to remember what's on the slide. So the bottom line is there's a lot of utilities that have hit the world, all free or very low cost, and they're very well written on the main. There's very few badly written ones, and I suspect it's a lot of people who've retired at about the age of mid-50, who are software engineers and keen astronomers, and just thought, what can I do that's useful?
Okay, and you just got the error on 2022 now.
Oh, what?
Yep.
That's crazy. I did that 4 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Ah.
I'm wondering if you want to send me. You want to send me the photo. You want to send me the what is it? Slide. You got slides though, right?
Well, what I'm going to do is take it off full screen. Maybe it'd be faster.
Maybe.
Oh no, I can't do that, can I? Is there any way to? Oh, why is it doing it so slowly?
I don't know. Odd.
Okay, so I can see what you can see now.
Yeah, so
what
you
I'm
got
going
the
to
whole
have
list of 2022 right now.
Yeah. My bandwidth should be good enough for this. I can watch movies and stuff.
I'm sure.
I don't know why it's being.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's a Saturday too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that's, darn it, that's really bad. Because my live, I can see my live feed, and it's it's going to be really difficult to talk to something that's not on screen.
Do you want to? I'm trying to think if I could send it. If you could send it to me, I could do it from here.
No, because it's I'm not doing that.
Okay. Now it just came up to Hidden Galaxy.
Yeah, I can see that now on the live feed. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right, in that case, because I need to get this moving on, and then what I'm going to do is monitor. The problem is I need to leave it on screen in order for it to register and come across. So So one of the things that, other than just software, also the hardware has changed. And you mentioned the Eagle before, which isn't necessarily the cheapest thing in the world, but it's quite clever the way it's integrated stuff. That personally isn't my preference. I prefer to keep the computers separate to other things. So on the next slide, I've got a Raspberry Pi 4 next to an Intel NUC, and the Intel NUC is over 5 times the price of the Raspberry Pi 4. And as far as image capture is concerned, they can do pretty much the same thing. I don't particularly like using the Raspberry Pi because I don't particularly like using Linux. It's not, I find it too finicky. But this is going to be a problem. So if I look onto the other screen, I'm just flipping between the screens to see what you can see.
Yeah, right
You're
now
still on the old one.
Yeah, it just switched
No.
to
That
it's
doesn't
still on
work.
ASCOM.
Yeah.
Right now I see the hidden galaxy still.
The thing. I don't know what I'm going to do about this. I can't present like this.
No, I hear you. I don't know what I mean.
No.
We had no problem with
I can only think to try and log out and log back in again.
Try that.
But I just
right now
make sure.
Just switch to Raspberry Pi right now.
Yeah.
Now it's back to full screen.
Yeah.
What I'm going to try and I'm just wondering if it's I have an idea.
Okay.
So it's not going to be ideal, but the thing is, because I'm doing full screen, it's obviously this is a 5K monitor, so that might be the issue. So if I reduce the size of my screen, because you can't on this system, you can't share just an application. You can only do the full screen, can't you?
Right.
Right. So I'm going to use only part of the screen, and because it only has to refresh, hopefully the part they can see, hope it will refresh a bit faster and I can see what you can see. So I've moved to the next screen, but it hasn't flipped yet. So on the next slide that will be popping up on a screen near you anytime soon, you've got the 2010 free software that is listed mostly for Windows. There's a few for Linux and OS X. But they're the ones you kind of know, the PhD 2, oh, sorry, the PhD, I should say, not 2, the Meta Guide, the Planetarium CDC. There's also another planetarium that's less well known called C2A, and early versions of Stellarium and so on. And then you've got the new stuff that will appear on your screen anytime soon on the right. Oh, it's doing something.
Looks like you went back to...
Wait for it to change. Oh, that is odd. Come on. Okay. Well, the new free software, you've got a couple of quite interesting and important ones, some of which you'll know and some you may not. Obviously, PhD 2 has taken over from PhD and is widely used. You've also got a number of the common planetariums now being offered in the other operating systems as well. And you've also got an imaging program called CCDCL. And has anyone heard of CCDCL?
No, I haven't.
So it's written by the same guy that wrote the CDC planetarium.
Okay.
So Frenchman. There we go. All right, it's on screen now. Cool. So CDC, it reminds me of nebulosity. If you've got a laptop or an iPad or something like that and you're running remotely and you haven't got huge screen estate, CCDCL is a very nifty program. You can do sequences, you can do automation with it, but the interface is very clear and it hides stuff away so it doesn't get in the way, and it's getting quite a following. It's free, and it's you can put it directly onto a Linux Raspberry Pi. You can also put it onto a Mac, which is quite unusual. Further down the list, you'll see Nina, which clearly a number of you are already aware of, and that's changing every other day.
Yep.
And a couple of other planetariums, including HN Sky.
Mm-hmm.
HN Sky is actually written by the same guy that wrote ASTAP, which seems to be the go-to astrometry program that everyone uses nowadays. Another one that has been a little while in the making, but it's sort of coming of age now, is one called Cyril.
Yep.
So Cyril is a graphical front end to Iris, apparently. And 3 years ago it was a bit primitive. They stored a stack as a 16-bit image, which is missing the point rather. So I did sort of suggest that they might want to save a stack as a 32-bit image, and I got a load of French abuse for it anyway. Plate Solve 2, which was a giveaway, I think, from one of the telescope manufacturers,
Planewave,
which SGP used to use a lot of.
Yeah, Planewave was
ASTAP, as you've heard before. And the other thing that ASTAP can do, it's probably it's got a number of purposes. There's obviously the plate solving that it does as a command line, but it also does stacking. You can use it as an image stacker, and you can also do star analysis with it.
Yep.
Rather like CCD Inspector. And also it becomes a FITS viewer. So I don't bother with FITS Liberator anymore. I use ASTAP. And so on, all the way down there. And then typically the Linux ones are at the bottom. So you've got AstroBerry, which is a slightly clever version of the free K-Stars and ECOS environment, which allows you to do it remotely. And numerous phone and tablet apps that are a few bucks or free that allow you to find things in the sky. So I need to flip. Just change to the next slide. And then you've got some budget software. It'll take about 30 seconds to come up. You've got Stellarmate, which is an operating system that's sold on a Raspberry Pi, which uses ECOS and a few other things as well. You've got Sharpcut Pro that has a free version, but if you pay I think $10 a year or something, it unlocks the Pro version. And one of the nice features of the Pro version, it has a very natty polar alignment routine that's very accurate. You've got APT or astrophotography tool that I don't get on with. It does a little bit of everything, but okay. If you're starting out, it might be great. And the same with Backyard EOS or Nikon. It does some unique things, which allows you to focus Canon lenses through its interface, which is quite natty if you're actually imaging with a camera lens. And further down the list, there's Star Tools, which is an image processing app that runs both on Windows and OS X. And we'll look at that a little bit later on. And the last one, but not least, Affinity Photo. So Affinity is a rebranding of the old Serif software company. And they've been around for decades. And they wrote a triplet of programs, Affinity Photo, Designer, and Publisher. And they're taking on Adobe Photoshop, InDesign, and Illustrator. And I use Affinity Photo all the time now. And a full suite of their software is the same as 2 months of rental of Adobe software.
Wow.
And I've had multiple updates in the last 4 years. So I do not use Adobe software anymore. I find it annoyingly expensive and not necessarily the best. And the other nice thing about Affinity Photo is one of the guys who's one of the software engineers is an astronomer. And he's actually put some Astro tools into Affinity Photo so it can do some clever things.
Apparently in the chat, you got Affinity Photos, got a bunch of fans in there.
Okay, so I'm just waiting for it to flip over. So I've just put a picture of M106 up that I think was over 100 hours. Yeah,
Wow.
when you look on the internet and you find a beautiful image, it says, I can do that, I can see that, it's high enough in the horizon, I'm going to do that one. You should just double check how they took it. And the pictures I was looking at were actually augmented by X-rays from, I think, from Chandra. So a lot of the tendrils I thought, wonderful, I thought they were HA because they were coloured red, actually were X-rays. So after too many hours imaging, then I realized that the images I saw on the internet actually were not just a visible light.
That's funny.
So yeah, just it hasn't come up yet.
Nope.
Pain.
You should go to the next one now. If you.
Yeah, I think I'll just do that. I was just going to move briefly onto planetariums and go through some of the planetariums, but I'm going because it's taking a while. I'm just going to go to the more unusual ones and wait for it to flip over. So you can see M106 up there. So there's a couple of spiral tendrils that aren't in the plane of the galaxy. They go up and down, but apparently that's not. I thought it was hydrogen alpha or sulfur, but it's not. It's actually X-rays. No matter how many hours I did, and I got quite an extended field on the image, unfortunately, it didn't want to play ball.
Nope.
Yeah, my declination. My latitude here is 51 degrees.
Okay.
So anything below about -15 dec is tricky.
Yeah.
Sure.
So right, I'll just wait for it to flip over. So carte de ciel we're aware of. I've moved on to C2A. It'll flip in just a second, hopefully, because I only.
Yep.
Oh, there we are.
Oh, somehow it got faster now.
Well, no, it's because it is purely a delay. It's interesting. It's purely a delay. It's not bandwidth.
No, it's not. I mean, I got gigabit up, gigabit down. So
yeah. So Anyway, this is quite an interesting program. It'll do telescope support, but it has an amazing ability to pull in lots of strange catalogs, and it's quite good for planning because it shows the perimeter of nebulas and stuff like that. So sometimes it's difficult to define a nebula boundary, and they just put a simple circle. But in this case, they're quite good. Sort of similar to in the Sky X when you use isophytes. So I'm going to have fun. Hopefully you'll catch up in a second. So the next one is K-stars. This is the default planetarium for the Linux-based systems, and within it is the imaging capture system called ECOS. I find it very fussy on screen. It's great on a big monitor. It's hopeless on a small one, and I don't use it. I've abandoned it. So even though I started off getting AstroBerry and K-stars and ECOS on Linux, I actually decided to load my Raspberry Pi with pure Linux, and I used Patrick's Carte de Ciel and CCD-CL as my imaging program and capture program, and I got better success with that. It was a much easier interface.
Nice.
So I'm hoping that will flip over in a second. Then there's HN Sky, which is the ASTAP author, and I'm going to have to do. So there's your K-stars. I'm looking at the live feed as well simultaneously. So K-stars is very fussy. All the icons are very small. They haven't really thought it through, frankly.
Yeah, actually, I played around with K-stars when I was playing around with a couple of actually that was with the StellarMate.
With the StellarMate, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was with the StellarMate, and I attempted to use the StellarMate, and I had to take the video offline because it was just too damaging. People were like yelling at me, "You can't say that," and I took it offline for a little bit.
While we're waiting for the other slide here, Chris, we did have a question earlier from Beatrice while we're waiting for the slide to
about
change
the
over.
RCs.
Yeah, about the RCs, and she was just curious when you did have your RC, do RCs lose collimation easily even when they're on a pier? She thought RC truss
not
designs
typically.
were great.
They can do if they go through a massive heat cycle. Like a lot of Richie Cretton's, my optics were GSO optics, and obviously the third parties just put their own framework around it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I improved the robustness of mine by changing the push-pull adjustment screws on the main mirror, and I used spiked grub screws rather than flat ones, and drilled a little tiny conical hole in the back of the mirror housing. So the thing is that when you released or the tension on it, the mirror, if the telescope was pointing other than straight up or straight down, the mirror would slide sideways. So even with one of my set of adjusters was always locked. I only did a collimation using 2 adjusters. I never touched the third one ever. And even so, it would slide sideways. So I found a way of trying to center it. So I hung it downwards on the pull bolts, and then drilled my tiny little conical holes, put my grub screws in, and then tighten it up. And then all my major adjustments on the primary, I always did it facing straight up or straight down, so the mirror wouldn't slide sideways.
Wow.
And I also, and people say don't do this, the adjusters on the secondary were very, there's a lot of static friction on it, so that it was very difficult to do a small adjustment. So I removed the bolts one by one and greased them and put them back, and got some very long Allen wrenches, and I could very, very gently alter it. The book, the advanced book on astrophotography, you'll laugh when I set myself a budget of 5 pages to explain how to collimate an RC, and I realized I needed 25 pages because there are so many different ways of potentially doing it. And the dilemma is, if I just simply chosen what I use, you know what's going to happen. Someone says, "Oh, I do this. Why didn't you mention this?" So I basically bought or borrowed or stole every gizmo possible to align an RC, and went through them all one by one and looked at the repeatability and accuracy of them. And a lot of devices rely on the assumption that the mirrors are centered within mechanical interfaces. And the only thing that's important is the alignment of the mirrors, not the alignment of, the shroud or the mirror housing. So when I realized that, my engineering brain sort of stepped into gear and said, well, actually, the best way is the stars themselves, and the second best way is something called Hall of Mirrors, which is when you look, it's a bit like this screen on the right hand side here, when you can see a screen capture of a screen capture of a screen capture.
Yeah.
When those screen captures all line up, they're centered. And it's exactly the same with looking down the end of an RC. When the reflections of the secondary and primary in themselves are all symmetrical, the 2 mirrors are facing one another orthogonally, because there's no other way that can happen. And so it can't lie. So, but I take my RC on and off my pier quite frequently. And occasionally I'd have to touch the secondary, but the primary normally stays put. But you just have to be a little bit careful. You just handle it with kid gloves, don't thump it, and do your adjustments in a controlled manner, and it normally keeps collimation fairly well. I don't travel with it. It's just not very it's not a good idea.
Sure.
So you can see an image come up now. So not all my things are long focal lengths. So this was done with a Red Cat, the William Optics Red Cat.
Yep.
With a color camera on the back end. I think it was a APS-C color camera, and then I fiddled with it a bit. I put some filters in it. So you can. I quite like wide field stuff. It's quite interesting, and it makes a change from all the close up stuff. So the next part of the presentation, I thought, would look at some of the low cost capture software, and I'm trying to get ahead of ourselves. I'm going to come on to the interesting one. So you're probably familiar with Backyard EOS,
Yeah, sure.
and APT and SharpCap Pro. So I'm just going to look at the ones that you're probably not so familiar with and wait for it to pop up. So I'm going to look at CCD-CL.
Okay.
As I said, it has a beguiling interface that isn't fancy. There's no fancy icons. It looks very straightforward, and it is remarkably reliable. And it's being maintained and several, and it's available in lots of different operating systems. So I can play with it on the Mac and then use the Linux version or the Windows version if I choose. And it's something I would certainly consider if I was going into the field with a 12-inch laptop and wanted to run remotely, and I wanted to be able to read what was on the screen. But it's free. It's worth taking a look at if you want to keep things simple, because the one after that, which I'm going to flip to, that will flip in just 2 seconds, hopefully, if my assumption's right. Right. Oh, good. You can see it now. So you could see me in real time only 3 minutes later. Okay, that's cool. So it might be worth looking at CCD-CL, because the one coming after that is Nina, which some of you will be aware of.
Yep.
And sometimes it's all about reliability and simplicity. And I don't know about you, but I'm not at my best at the middle of the night.
No.
So something that's simple is great. Or in the case of Nina, something that I've done all the intelligent thinking some time ago and just can play back is another way around it. So I'm going to click onto Nina. And for those of you who don't know about Nina, it's another free application. And when you're writing software, you're often locked in to you define an architecture for your software, and that tends to lock in what you can and can't do with it. So Sequence Generator Pro, that was a favorite of mine for many years, has kind of fallen out of favor because they've hit the walls of the limitations of the architecture to some degree, and they tried to sort of do some fancy things with it and kind of fallen over a bit. Nina, their architecture is different, and it allows it to expand better. And one of the beautiful things about Nina is that it's more complete in so much that you can plan an imaging session as well as execute it. So I can see my mouse moving around on your screen.
Yeah, I can.
I'm just waiting for it to flip over. Come on.
There you go.
Ah, there we go.
There you go.
So I'm going to so they use Discord like you do as their forum. It's not the greatest format for a forum because all there's no threads as such.
No.
It's very difficult to get disjointed, and people don't know who they're answering. And I don't know why they chose Discord. It's the most stupid thing about the whole program is they're choosing Discord. They'd be much better just doing a Google group or something.
I think they have, from what I remember, I think they have both. They do have an IO group, if I remember right. And Discord, to me, is more of like, I need an answer now. And
yeah,
a lot of people like you. When I started, when I was, I'm like you. I'm a Nina convert from SGP, and Nina's just been. And Eric's now just starting to play with Nina. He's trying to broaden his horizons with something other than ASI Air, so he's trying different things as well.
Yeah.
But Nina, as far as the Discord channel, it like I had an issue with my advanced sequencer, and I said, listen, something's going clunky with this. Can somebody check it out? They said, load up the logs. They load up the logs. And I didn't answer in 5 minutes. So
yeah,
you
and they're quite clever the way you can upload logs to it, and it also tracks what they're doing in terms of there's a proper issues tracker, and you can see what's happened on that. So there is some intelligence to it, but as a general sort of ask a question, come back the next day, see there's an answer, it doesn't work because there's a whole bunch, there's 50 other conversations that happened in the meantime.
Yep.
So I'm now playing a game of tag. So you can see the picture of the sequencer,
the framing wizard.
The framing wizard.
The framing wizard. Yep.
The nice thing about this is that you can obviously look up objects. You can define your, it'll use your equipment parameters and set up angles, and it'll also do mosaics. And you can either update a target already in a sequence, or create, in this case, a simple sequence. So all the complexity you see on screen is largely auto-populated, and you can just tinker with it. It shows the altitude of the object during imaging night. Obviously, this was an example, so it's in the wrong hemisphere. But a lot of things are done for you, or assumptions are done for you, which you can use and just turn off on and off options. And for people starting off, this might be the way to go. The drawback that you're seeing here is kind of what people see on a small screen, is the text is very small.
Yep.
And so it makes it virtually impossible to read on a small screen. It's bad enough on a 5K monitor.
Mm-hmm.
And so quite a few people, the reason they use Nina is not because of the simple sequencer, but because of their advanced sequencer, which has been around for about a year in various guises. And it gets updated probably a few times a week at the moment. So I can see that the mouse is moving. So the advanced sequencer allows you basically to create a program, and you drag instructions, you drag conditions, and you can do whatever you like, pretty much. So with my roll-off roof, I want to close that roof down whenever there's bad weather, and that could be waiting for it to get dark. It could be waiting for the camera to cool. It could be waiting for the actual target to rise above the horizon. And you can actually create a sequence that automatically says, hey, the weather's bad, park the mount because it's a paramount, and if you don't park it, you'll take the top off it. Close the roof and wait for the conditions to improve, and then, open the roof and carry on. And you can do all that in Nina and save it as a template. And you can reuse the template. So I have 4 templates. I have a startup routine, a shutdown routine, and I have two imaging routines. One that auto calibrates the guider, and the one that actually does the acquisition. And I can use those 4 templates with my observatory, and I don't have to worry about, is it going to shut the roof if the weather turns bad? It's already, I've done all the thinking up front. You can check it out with simulators using virtual devices as opposed to real ones. And once you test it out with a laptop in the observatory to make sure you don't try and create a collision. But if you're wise, when you design your roll-off roof system, for instance, you actually have some safety lockouts. That means the roof will not shut if the mount isn't parked. So there's switches and stuff in the way. And then the other thing that, that's come up fast this time. Well, that's interesting. It's trying to catch me out. So the other thing that is unique about Nina are the plugins. So about 6 months ago, I don't think there were any plugins, and these have all appeared since then. Some are designed to augment certain bits of hardware, like 10 micron or astrophysics, and they will do things like send and update atmospheric refraction data to the mount if it does tracking and such. The other thing that it allows you to do is have far more intelligent sequences. So, for instance, I connect and disconnect all my equipment when I need to, and only when I need to. I can also do auto darks or auto flat exposures, which are quite useful. The one I've got highlighted called orbiculum, which I don't actually know what it means. I should look it up sometime.
Yeah, I have no idea.
This allows you to do some very clever instructions and loop conditions. So, for instance, you can wait until your object reaches a certain altitude, or you can wait until the next target is above the horizon, things like that. So it allows you to do multiple targets in one night and manage the way it goes from one to the next.
So I was curious to know what orbiculum was. Just
okay.
To see. It means a crystal ball that could tell the future, which makes sense.
Oh, right. Google is your friend.
Absolutely.
It also has something called auto balancing exposure, which is a fairly recent addition to it. So the trouble is, when you start an imaging night and you start off with red, green, blue, and you get through the reds and you get halfway through the greens, and then the weather turns, and the next night it's got all red, green, blue, so you get reds, greens. Well, what it can do is it can automatically say, hey, you've already done the reds and a bit of the greens, so let's just carry on with the greens and finish with the blues. So there's a way of balancing exposures between filters and such. There's a couple of other things which are quite useful if you're running remotely. This button here called Remote Copy taps into something that's been in Windows for decades that allows you to copy files from. It monitors a folder on your Windows computer, and when a new file appears in that folder, it will copy it somewhere. So, for instance, you can download your images during the exposure of the exposure, which is quite handy. Let's see how this. Oh, it's instantaneous now. And there's a special recovery mode. Right, that's interesting. So can you see that full screen now?
I can.
I can. Yeah.
Ooh, it's suddenly come good. How bizarre. So yeah, Nina does take a little bit of effort and a few of these to get your head around it. But one of the ways to get started is try and find a friend who can give you some templates, because they can help you understand the structure of the advanced sequencer very quickly, and then you can just modify it to suit. So a couple of my colleagues, I've never met them in my life. I think they're Image from Texas. And we've been exchanging templates, and we've learned his system's slightly different to mine, but we've learned things along the way, which is great. Which is the reason I like astrophotography, is that none of us have all the answers. We're all learning all the time, and it doesn't matter where in the world you are, we can all help each other, which is great.
Absolutely.
I love it too.
So auto guiding, we all know about auto guiding. Let's get this on the screen.
Nope.
So
and now it's slowing down again.
Oh no, come on. Let's just take a look. Right, I'll just wait for it to. I've just gone off full screen again.
It just went to the auto guiding.
Yeah, right. All right.
It's a little faster than before, but
yeah. So here's the thing: we can be seduced by technology, and encoder mounts are one of those seductive things that meant to cure all ills. I've had 2 encoder mounts, and they didn't cure any ills. They made me ill, because they're not as good as you think they are. Not necessarily because the hardware is poor. It's often the software and the assumptions that they're based on are actually in need of a little bit more thought. So I've had 10 micron mounts before and had stand-up battles with the company because they just didn't work for a number of reasons, and it took them several years to correct the faults. And I wasn't going to wait several years.
There's been a couple of members that have purchased 10 micron mounts and have subsequently sent them back recently. So
yeah,
so they're still going through some bumps in the road, and but
well, one of the problems is that 10 micron basically all go through Beta Planetarium. That's a German distributor. Beta Planetarium used to be a very, very good company, and it was run by an astronomer, I think it's Matthias Bader, I think his name was, and his son's taken over the business. This is what I've been told, allegedly. And his son is more about making money, and he preferred to sell thousands of solar sunglasses than help a customer who's just paid £25,000 for GM2000 that's gone wrong 3 months in.
Wow.
So that's what I'm hearing. That's my experience too. I had they were also the distributor for Paramount in Europe, in the EU, and I had a board failure, and they told me that they couldn't get hold of the boards. I waited weeks and weeks, and in the end I contacted Software Beast myself, and they said, yeah, we've got plenty of boards, no one's asked us for one. And I got it, and they sent it to me, and I got it 3 days later. So that's kind of where I'm at with them, and I try and avoid them now. Other people have had no problem, but I know, unfortunately, an increasing number of people who don't rate them. Anyway, let's see how fast that. Oh, it's quick again. So this is a recent one. Oh, this is ridiculous. It's like playing.
Like ping pong.
Yeah. So I did this year, and I've never done these two before, but it's quite faint, and I don't know if you can see on the screen, but I managed to get the outflow up here where my mouse is up on the hockey stick, which is so. I try to do the longest exposures feasible to try and see the extended field of things, rather than just the brightest parts. So PhD2, we're all aware of PhD2, but there's been a couple of things recently which are quite interesting. So they have this thing called PPEC correction, which actually works quite well. I have a rainbow mount that we'll look at briefly later on, and it does a fair job of working out the periodic error and doing it up front, as it were. It's got some new algorithms. There's a couple of quite interesting algorithms. Z-filter is quite interesting. So if you have quite high periodic error and you need to do rapid guiding on the right ascension, but you don't necessarily want to get your declination axis all excited, you can use something called Z-filter on the declination axis, and in effect it will reduce the amount of noise going into the declination axis by looking at not just one sample but multiple samples before making a decision. But it's a moving average. The clever thing, it's a moving average, so it isn't like equivalent to having a 10-second exposure. It's like having a 10-second exposure shift. Let's say a 1-second exposure versus a 10. It's like having a 1-second exposure that's shifted by 10 seconds. So if your drift isn't too bad, you can keep up with the trend quite easily, but it uses 10 seconds of data to work out whether the trend is bad or not. And it's actually quite effective in some cases. The other thing that people sometimes find is that PhD2 quietly implements its own drivers for some cameras, like Starlight Express and I think also QHY. And they're often better than using the ASCOM drivers, which, quite frankly, for Starlight Express are pretty ropey. And I haven't used them in years because they just gave me grief all the time. And also multiple star guiding. One of the things about multiple star guiding, it isn't. The idea is with multiple star guiding is that if you have seeing noise on your guide star, that if you have multiple stars, it sort of averages out. So if you take the positions of multiple stars, it averages out. But that isn't quite the case. If you've ever taken short exposures through a long reflector like a Ritchie Creton, you'll see that the aberration that you get from the seeing is identical across all the stars because it's in a small field. But on a wide field lens, say 150 mil focal length or shorter, there is a variation in the seeing across the stars that it can see. And so multiple star guiding is a useful thing to do if your guide scope is short. I would say it's of less use if it's 500 mil or 300 mil long. I don't think it makes much difference. And the other thing is, as everyone knows, PhD2 is quite cleverly got very good integration with the various imaging apps, which isn't necessarily the same as MetaGuide. So if you're using a video camera, MetaGuide in effect does the opposite of trying to do filtering. It does fast and furious, and it tries to follow a guide star in almost real time. I've used it with mixed success, but it doesn't play as nicely with the imaging applications. You can't manage it, start guiding, stop guiding, and calibrate this. It doesn't have the sophisticated interface that PhD2 has. So I only use it rarely. And then I'm going to, whoops. And then the other ones, there's another one. Let's see, just check. I've got to flip. I'm full screen, so I have to flip back to see what you're seeing.
Yeah, we're still seeing it hasn't changed yet.
Let's wait for it to change. Hang on. The other free utilities. So have you come across Max Pilot?
No.
So Max Pilot is a bit like ACP in a way. It was written to manage MaximDL, but it also does other things as well. So it is like a scheduler. It's been going for a number of years. It's written by a French gentleman. It's worth having a look at. Sometimes you want to sort of do clever things with your program, and the programs themselves won't manage it. So I can see you've got MetaGuide up now.
Yep.
Okay. But the interesting thing is that I know a lot of people have started off with Maxim, then they went to SGP, and now they're doing Nina. And I know about 5 people who've done exactly the same as myself, where they just found that they weren't getting any response to problems on the Maxim forum. They went to SGP, which sort of worked.
That's exactly
what I did. And yeah. And the other little one at the bottom here, when it comes up on the screen, the one at the bottom, network time protocol synchronization, which is called dimension 4. So obviously, every second, stars appear to shift 15 arc seconds. So having your computer on an accurate time is useful. Now, any computer attached to the internet typically updates its time automatically. But if you've got a computer sitting out in an observatory, they don't typically. And the other thing is that some of these computers, because they rely on the internet to update their clocks, their actual clock accuracy is appalling. So my Intel NUC computer in the observatory loses about a second a day. So I basically tell this little freebie program called Dimension 4 to synchronize my computer with a network time protocol, and it synchronizes then with the SkyX, and I get much better pointing accuracy as a result. And for those people running obviously an encoder mount, and they want to make sure that their timing's accurate, I would throw a little bit of caution down, is that your no computer clock is going to lose time that quickly. So the best thing to do is to synchronize at the beginning, because typically the clocks in a mount are crystal controlled, not ceramic oscillator controlled, and they typically are quite reliable. So once you've got the initial time set up, I wouldn't necessarily keep on trying to resync the time, because there's a good chance there's more variability in the synchronized time than in the error. So you actually can introduce step errors into your time base, which isn't always a good idea.
All right. All right.
So let's have a look. Then I wanted to just look at interface standards. So I'm just going to wait for it to pop over. So everyone's aware of ASCOM
Sure.
in all its guises. Lots of interesting discussions with ASCOM developers over the years. I've written about half a dozen ASCOM drivers. Now, those of you who are old enough will remember a disaster called 3 Mile Island.
Yep.
And when I was at university, I was taught about why 3 Mile Island came about. And one of the reasons was when they flipped a switch to do a pressure relief valve, the light lit up on the switch that said, you've a pressure relief valve, but it wasn't. All it meant was they'd flipped the switch, and it wasn't actually any feedback from the valve itself. It was just a switch, a light bulb on the switch. And that was one of the things that they realized. So I wrote all my ASCOM drivers, for instance, for the roll-off roof, to say what the roof status was from the sensors, not from what you hope it would be. But according to the ASCOM developers, that's the wrong way to go. It's fire and forget, as far as they're concerned. Open the roof, and they assume it's open unless you tell it otherwise. But of course, on a roll-off roof, you don't know whether it's opening or closing until about 30 seconds later.
Yep. So
I had quite a entertaining discussion with Bob Denny and his like. But it's just, once you know that that's their assumption, you just have to roll with it. But from an engineering perspective, from my training, that isn't how it should work. But it's caught me out on more than one occasion. And it's even to the effect of, well, they said, well, we can't wait 30 seconds to know whether the roof's open or closed. But it even goes down to relays. So if you have the ASCOM switch interface and you flip a relay, and our relay flips in what, 50 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, they won't even wait for that. They want an immediate response that it has opened or closed the relay, and only tell them later if it failed to. So you have, those people want to write ASCOM drivers, just be careful about that, because it catches a lot of people out, including some of the Nina developers. So you can see the Jellyfish Nebula on the screen now, I think.
Yep.
That's one of my favorites. And you show people in schools doing outreach, and you show them something like this, and they don't know what it is. Well, what is that? You know, it's just, it always amazes me what you can see after about 80 hours.
That's 80 hours.
Something like that.
Oh my
Remember, I'm light polluted.
Oh, me too.
So this has come very quickly now. That's bizarre. This came through immediately.
Very odd.
So
we got gremlins.
We have gremlins. Anyway, we like gremlins. So the interface stands at the bottom here. You've got ASCOM that we all know, love and hate. ASCOM Alpaca, which is trying to forge a bridge between a Windows. They keep on saying it's got nothing to do with Windows. Alpaca hasn't, but ASCOM always will be. So ASCOM is still a device driver sitting on a Windows machine, and Alpaca will communicate to it from another platform. Indy is the primary one used on Linux, and some of you may have also heard of Indigo. Come across Indigo? Anybody? So Indigo is in effect.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I've heard of Indigo, but I really haven't personally used it, but I have heard about it.
So basically, Indigo is like a modern version of Indy. And if you look long and hard in Cloudy Nights, I wrote a post that said, hey guys, why don't you get together and come up with one standard? And I said, I don't want this to be a thread about whose interface is best, because that's irrelevant. If you put yourself in a developer's, you know, I've got a camera, and I've now got to write three device driver interfaces. So think of that. You know, every person that writes a piece of hardware has got to write 3 device interfaces.
Oh.
Why can't you just come up with one and agree? And of course, you can guess how that thread went. It was all it. But 3 is better than 1,000. But it is a shame, because the fundamentals are the same in each case. There's subtleties in the way they've done it, but you know, ultimately the things we need to do with our devices are the same no matter what platform we use. And it's just a bit sad that, unfortunately, you know, people have spent, these are all free, so people have spent their own free time developing these, which is really great. But they've got to kind of put their egos aside and say what's the best thing for the community. And that's a very difficult
what I was
thing
thinking
to do.
as well. I was going to ask you, do you think it's a bit more hubris on these developers' parts? You know?
Yeah. It's like the word consensus. Consensus, no one's happy in a consensus, but everyone can accept the result.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's now flipped. Oh, it's flipping in seconds now.
Okay. I don't know what's going on. Someone's the internet connection must be unstable somewhere.
Yeah, you can mix and match operating systems. So you could have a small computer on your little mount. You can connect with Wi-Fi to a whole bunch of different things, either using something like remote desktop or a VPN, or an actual app running on your computer. That's so. The nice thing is that people, especially who are going out, you know, you live in the city, you want to drive 30 miles away from the city, get into a dark field site. These sorts of things make it quite easy, so you can do it from the comfort of your car, and control it all remotely. So all my stuff in my observatory, and even the stuff I put in the back garden, is all done through Windows Remote Desktop. And then the ironic thing is, I haven't a clue why this is the case. On a Mac, I can have 4 remote desktops on the screen at the same time. I've got all these different imaging computers, and they're all on the screen at the same time. On a Windows PC, I can only have one.
Yep.
And it's Windows Remote Desktop. It's like, come on, guys. What? You did it for Mac. Why can't you do it for your own operating system?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, it's taking a second and a half now. So this is another longish exposure. It looks fairly grey because there's a lot of dark nebulosity around this and a lot of dust, and it sort of picks up the dust. And if I click onto the next one, so we moved on to imaging editors, and I'm going to quickly, because we need to catch up in time a bit. We all know what imaging editors are. So we're all familiar with Deep Sky Stacker. We need to be a bit careful with Deep Sky Stacker. They're taking a while to realize that CCDs and CMOS cameras calibrate differently. And I don't know if they've caught up yet. When I last looked, they hadn't. So they were calibrating a CMOS camera just like they would a CCD, and it was leaving problems behind. Sequator, it's really quick now. Sequator is one of those small imaging programs that's typically used called landscape astrophotography. So you know, Milky Way shots over a mountain, it's a little freebie, and it's quite interesting. It runs on Windows only. One that runs on Mac only. If you want to do star trails, there's one called Star Stacks. I've used this. It's quite effective. And the other one, which I want to spend a little bit of time with, is Star Tools. So my previous books, I've always used PixInsight, Sequence Generator Pro, and I needed to use other programs because my readers needed to understand what alternatives were there. So I've deliberately put aside my favorite programs and started to use all these weird ones. Star Tools is an imaging program. Its interface is a lot simpler than PixInsight. It does not do calibration. Its starting point is 3 stacks of images. But interestingly, it can come up with a quite different result. So I'm going to do this full screen so you can see the difference. So I just took some fairly fresh images of M3 and processed it like I normally would. First in PixInsight, and then I did it in Star Tools. And Star Tools, you can see the stretch is very different. Even though the extent of the field is pretty much the same, the Star Tools is quite good in that it's kept some of these really, what I call bloaters, it's kept them fairly small. And the central field of the globular cluster is fairly restrained, and you can make out the individual stars. And what I realized it was doing is it's putting a sort of blurry mask that sort of holds back some of the stretching in the middle. You can then, once you kind of work out what it must have done, you can go back into PixInsight and you can recreate it. And I managed to make something that was fairly similar. But one of the things it does seem to do a very good job of is it tends to keep stars quite small. And if you look at this star here and compare it to the equivalent in the other one, it is a lot smaller. So Star Tools has its place. And for instance, can you see the Pelican Nebula?
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, we're still seeing M3.
Now we do.
There we go.
So I processed this completely in Star Tools. It's the first image I did with it. I didn't read the instructions, and I just went, let's click some buttons and see what it does. And I managed to make this out in an hour. Now, there is a drawback with Star Tools. Unlike PixInsight, where you can save a project and you can use the history editor to go back and roll back and start again. It's a one-way trip with Star Tools.
It is.
I mean, it has a log file, but once you go down that road, you can't really go back up it again. So when you image process with Star Tools, you need to give yourself enough time to get to an end result. But I was quite pleased with that. That's from a quite famous astrophotographer who writes internationally, and he does a lot of work with international observatories, and he was imaging this on a 18-inch down in Chile, and he got an image of this, and to be honest, they're virtually the same. But the big difference is he did his in a single night with his telescope, and it took me best part of a month to do this. So you can achieve what big observatories and big telescopes do with care, but you need infinite patience. And Cyril, let's see when it goes across. I'm just going to bring up the other screen.
I started out with Star Tools, and then I switched, and it is quite good, and it's relatively fairly priced, compared to PixInsight and some other imaging, processing tools. The one thing that I had, it was a little bit confusing for me, but to your point, you just by clicking around the buttons and playing around with it for a while, you can still kick out a nice little image.
Very much so. I think actually you don't have to pay for it. I think it's a sort of option to pay for it, if I remember rightly.
I think you may be right there. Yeah, I think it's just optional.
It doesn't chase you for it. I think the drawback is that when you just stand back from image processing, we all know that there's so many different types of images. Just those last two images I had, a globular cluster, which is purely stars, versus a nebula, which is, clouds of three narrowband clouds of very different intensities. It's impossible to make an image processing program simple, because what you're trying to achieve is every image is different, and they throw unique challenges in your way. So I think Star Tools, when you actually look at their controls, they're probably no more or less complicated than PixInsight. They're slightly less pretentious, but what they have is just less controls, so it makes it look simpler. Several people have asked me to write a PixInsight manual, and I refuse to, because it would be dead boring to write and probably dead boring to read. And to be honest,
sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
No, I was getting a little bit confused there, because I know Sky Tools, and the Sky Tools that I'm used to was not the one that you were talking about. I was like, wow,
that's Star Tools, not Sky Tools. Star Tools.
I'm sorry?
You said Sky Tools. That's Star Tools.
Oh, my bad. That's what I was...
Star Tools is actually is
so sorry. So sorry.
Star Tools is
no. I got caught that way as well. So Cyril's become better in it. It does do basic imaging. It does do calibration. I think the interface is still a little bit clunky, and I think you have to invest in writing some scripts or use their scripts to organize the original files and so forth. When I last looked, you had to have the files in folders, otherwise it didn't know where they were and all sorts. So it doesn't. I don't think at the moment it looks into fits headers and works out whether it's a green filter or a blue filter and things like that. So it's getting there. And if you wanted to do it on a real budget, you could do it. So how long is that going to take to? And lastly, Affinity Photo. It is just like Photoshop, but it does have some astrophotography related things in there. It will do alignment, it will do stacking, and it doesn't do calibration as far as I'm aware. But I like it. It works very well, and it works on the Mac very well. And I paid $30 for it about 3 years ago, and I haven't paid anything since. And it's had several updates, and it works, and that's all I can say. And in fact, their publisher, which is their version of InDesign, is more reliable than InDesign, which frequently crashed on me.
Have you ever had an opportunity to, this is just a little bit of bias for me because I use it quite often. Have you ever had an opportunity to use AstroPixel processor, or do you have any opinion on it?
It's one on my list. I have used it briefly, and okay. I bought it, but I found its image processing. It was quite limited, and it was. I could see it had a definite leaning towards doing mosaics.
Sure.
It seemed to have from the very, and it's only a very preliminary assessment. It seemed to have a very complete set of mosaic related calibration routines, but when you actually looked, it says, well, once I've got my stacks, what can I do with them? There wasn't a huge amount you could do with them, but it's still being developed, and I haven't gone into any depth. I need to turn to it. Well, I'm writing a book at the moment, and my initial concept was to treat PixInsight, StarTools, and APP on equal footing, and to run a worked example through each, and then I realized the limitations of them, so I can't really do that. So they're going to augment PixInsight in various things, or compare the calibration between two programs, or compare the stretching. I think that's probably where I'm at, because they're not PixInsight replacements. They offer a suite of tools that overlap PixInsight, but not fully overlap. And I think it's good that all these programs are out there. And the one I won't touch is Voyager on the capture side.
We just had Voyager on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, there's a couple of my colleagues made some criticism of it, and they got thrown off the forum, which I thought was a bit, it's very powerful, and I can see it does, but I think there's no reason to use Voyager if I've got Nina. I think that's where I came out. And it's not inexpensive. I haven't got a professional observatory, so I can write software, but I don't really want to write software if I can help it. On utilities, there's a couple of utilities. I was mentioning about 10 micron. So 10 micron basically relied on all third parties to write their software for them to do anything useful, including the ASCOM driver and to create the models. Unfortunately, the person who wrote the originals, Per, who was a Swedish guy, he died suddenly of a heart attack or something, and so it's taken a while, but some others have taken up the guy. So, for instance, there's a company called Astronomy.ch who they design and sell little humidity and temperature meters and pressure meters, and they came up with a model creator. And the interesting thing is, I spoke to them, and they modified their program. It now works with rainbow mounts as well, which is quite nice. And onto gizmos. I need to probably move on. So very briefly, I was just going to look at 3 gizmos. I've heard that you've had StarAid on.
Yep. We had a Hendrik on. Sure.
So one of your colleagues asked me to review the StarAid, and I got sent one eventually to look at. And it had some problems, the one that I had, and so rather than write a public review, I wrote a report and sent it back to them. The guiding is fantastic. It guided a rainbow mount which had a peak-to-peak periodic error of 50 arc seconds, and it guided it beautifully. And what I did was ran 2 rigs. So I used PhD2 as a monitoring device, and I guided it with the StarAid, and it nailed it really well, better than I'd achieved with PhD2 on my own. On the polar alignment side, it was less good, but they've improved it since. So on my suggestion, they've kind of dropped or depreciated their drift alignment method for polar alignment because they don't rely on you pointing towards the meridian or the east or west. It's any periodic error or tracking error in RA affects the apparent drift measurement. So if I turned off periodic error correction on my power mount, it made the polar alignment worse.
Oh, wow.
But they've now done a system that's quite similar to SharpCat Pro. But just so that we're aware, there is no such thing as perfect polar alignment. So these 2 dots here, the one here, the turquoise one and the green one, both are T-point. So after a 400-point T-point model, it gives you a range of options depending what your poison is. So it's field rotation versus drift. So there's 2 arc seconds between those 2 points. So there is no such thing as perfect polar alignment. So I use SharpCat Pro or a Polemaster or the Nina plugin now, which does a very similar job.
Yep.
But StarAid were very good. They took the report and they implemented a number of things pretty quickly. And then COVID hit. I think one of them got ill, seriously ill, and it went a bit quiet for a while. But they've come back with a number of firmware updates since, and I think they've addressed the polar alignment issues. They said to me at one time that they were planning to do a full imaging computer, a bit like the Eagle. So it'd be interesting to see if they come out with that.
That'd be interesting, yeah.
So what we have now, I'm going to just stretch this a bit further. So harmonic drives, there was a wonderful thread on cloudy nights on harmonic drives with a whole load of people that hadn't got the mount but had a lot of opinion. So harmonic drives have been used quite for some time. So they're used in each of the individual motors of a moon buggy. They're very high torque, and they're also used in industrial robots. And you'll notice that these industrial robots, they can be carrying large chunks of metal around, and they don't have any counterweights. And similarly, perhaps the best known of them is probably called the Rainbow mount. It is you don't have to have counterweights with it. I do have a Paramount MYT. I can assure you, you cannot hold it on your hand like that.
No.
And that, to be honest, that is naughty. That suggests it's a lot lighter than it really is.
Yeah, with the counterweight on and the bar.
The Advertising Standards Agency in the UK would ban that, but anyway. But that is 26 kilos, so that includes the counterweight and its counterweight bar, and that is 3.5 kilos. And if I add a 3 kilo balance weight, it'll do 18 kilos of payload. So I have put a William Optics 130 with a full imaging rig on this little mount that's, the height of 2 Coke cans. So it is a remarkable little beast. It's not perfect, but it's getting some attention. So quite a few other manufacturers are starting to come up with their own versions. So one that was already around was the Crux.
Yep, the Hobum.
The Hobum Crux. Yeah, and I think the company that Rainbow and this company were related. I think they had a split, and they both went their separate ways. So ZWO are coming out with their own one. I think it's available now. A bit chunky, but seems okay. And the one that I'm interested in is the Pegasus one.
Yep.
I have some Pegasus equipment. They're a Greek company, and they write very good software. Their ASCOM drivers are faultless as far as I can see. So all the problems I typically have with mounts, typically around drivers, because the company is either a hardware manufacturer or a software manufacturer, and never the twain shall meet. So I'd be really interested to see how this pans out.
Yeah, that's coming out soon, and the AM5 is slated to be in the US by June.
Yep.
And shortly followed by the Pegasus Astro. What is it? The Mix or the Nix?
Yeah.
Nix.
Yep.
And it's going to be interesting because even in the chat, their chat, Hogarth is chatting that he's right. iOptron is next. They will be coming out with the next harmonic drive, and I'm sure the more and more that come out and level the playing field, the prices will start hopefully to decrease a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this one is slated at I think €2,500, which is a lot cheaper than that's just over £2,200, whereas a rainbow mount is £4,000.
Yeah, it's the 8,000. I'm sorry, the RC 300's $84.90 US dollars, and the AM5. I haven't even seen the price point of the Nix yet, but I know the AM5 is coming in just under $2,000 without the tripod.
Yeah, I mean, they say that they're backlash free. I don't think they are backlash free. But the thing about them is that they're such high torque motors that they guide quite well. And you can guide the rainbow mount at 5 times a second, and it just does it. It's astonishing. It just moves. And some people guide it at 100% guide rate. I don't think that's a brilliant idea personally, but because dynamically, why would you stop and start a motor rather than try and find the right rate? But anyway, it's an interesting development, and it probably reduces manufacturing variability to some degree, because worm drives are notoriously difficult to create, repeatedly and accurately. I did have a mount once that was called a Pro mount in its title, that had a periodic error measured in arc minutes. In fact, it wasn't one mount, it was 3 mounts, because it got replaced twice, and each of them had a periodic error measured in minutes. So that went back. And lastly, it's nice and snappy again. Star removal. So about a year ago, there was something called StarNet that was a plugin to PixInsight, and also I think an independent program as well. And it was okay at removing stars. You can in PixInsight do all kinds of weird and wonderful things, and you can kind of remove stars, but big stars are always a pain in the bottom. More recently, the company, so it's Russell Cronin.
Yeah,
he produced Gradient Exterminator.
RC Astro, yep.
Yep, he's produced something called Star Exterminator. So I took this image up here and ran it through both. So these are stretched after the event. So this was a raw image, a stack, unstretched, went through both of these processes and then stretched afterwards to show the result. StarNet requires you to make a small stretch for it to work. So I've stretched both equally because I stored it on PixInsight and applied it, and then applied another one on top. So all things being equal, I was quite impressed by Star Exterminator. It's not free like StarNet, but I think the difference is worth it. And that was the last bit. I mean, without knowing all your individual backgrounds, it's never quite easy to pitch it just right. But I'm hoping there was something for everybody.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and we got a lot of people hanging around in the chat. So that's so they're actually throwing questions back and forth regarding the harmonic drive, and since you have one, maybe you could shed some light on the high periodic error and why it occurs in a harmonic drive.
So there used to be a children's toy called Spirograph. I don't know if you remember, if it went over in the US.
That one I don't remember.
There were gears within gears, and you put a pen in a hole, and it made a nice little spiral pattern.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
now I
remember
know what you're
them.
talking about. Okay.
So,
Yes, the spirograph. Yeah, my kid sisters had one. They made nice little drawings and stuff like that, geometric drawings. Yeah, I remember those.
So the interesting thing is that they don't have a true periodic error, but if you looked at they do have an error that's periodic. It's not a true periodic error like a worm drive. It does repeat, and it does have the same period, but the amplitude of the error changes with time. So even if you look at ZWO's website where they've measured their periodic error, you can see that it modulates. So it's a bit like AM modulation almost. But the thing is, when you've got a periodic error or an error of tens of arc seconds, you can quite safely remove 80% of that, and then just guide out the rest. So Rainbow refuse on the small mount to actually implement periodic error correction, but they could do if they wanted to, because they could take out 80-90% of it, and then you could deal with the rest far more effectively with much longer exposures. On my Rainbow mount, the maximum rate of change of tracking error is just under 1 arc second per second. So you typically guide at 3 times a second, 4 to 3 times a second. And because of the high torque of the drives, it does guide pretty well. And I get RMS results. The best I think I've achieved is about, in good seeing conditions, is about 0.6 arc seconds RMS.
Okay.
In comparison, my MYT was doing about 0.5, and my MX in the observatory the best I've ever got is about 0.28.
Okay.
But of course, you've got to be careful with RMS measures, because if you take an RMS measure at high declination, you'll get a completely different result as if you do it at low declination.
Yeah.
So all my measurements are done at 0 dec, which is the worst case. But I noticed that I think ZWO are going to do some form of correction on theirs, and Rainbow do periodic correction on their heavier mount, the 300.
Yep.
But I suspect that when they use it in practice, they'll probably do it of some description and take the lion's share out.
Yeah.
The other thing that they go on a lot about is backdrive. So when you turn the power off, the whole thing flops down. Well, it isn't like an ADM, that's for sure. ASM, ADM. I can, if I really unbalance my telescope, I can make it sort of very slightly move. But if you stick something like a C11 on this tiny little mount, I think you're asking for trouble. Not the least, because it's only a finite amount of metal, and a small amount of metal will bend more than a large lump of metal. So I think there seems to be a cult of what can I get away with on this little mount. People are putting, someone wants to put a TAC 150 on it. I'm thinking, you've got to be joking. You'll break it.
Oh, I saw there was a picture on I think it was from ZWO, if I remember right. He had a 180 on the AM5. And
yeah,
I'm looking at it. You saw that picture, right, Eric? I mean, this thing was crazy. Yeah. It was as long as the kid controlling it, and I'm like, oh my god, he's gonna smack this scope over.
Yeah.
But the thing you got to remember is that this is a portable mount, so most people are on a tripod or a portable pier.
Right.
If it's unbalanced, that portable pier or tripod will flex, or it'll put a varying load on its 3 feet, and it will move. So all your wonderful polar alignment effort will go to pot. So the engineer in me says it makes sense to roughly balance it, to reduce the stresses on the system in general, and you'll get a better result. People say that it guides better unbalanced, but they don't. It's never been quantified. So I suspect that the gears need a bit of engagement in one direction, but how much engagement, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a sweet little thing. It puts a smile on my face when I use it, because you take it to a little star party and you take this out and they look at it and think, what the heck is that? And then you stick a TAC 106 on it and they go, what?
That's funny.
So it is amusing. It does work better at high voltages. It does 12 to 15 volts, and it definitely works better at higher voltages. That seems to be a common consensus. And the instruction book isn't great. It's a little bit on the primitive side. It's South Korean English, and with some of the help from the forum members, I wrote a supplementary guide and stuck it on various drop boxes and such. And Rainbow have linked to that as well. So that's a sort of user's guide to the mount in practical terms, which I think a lot of people find useful. So yeah, it's a good little mount.
Chris,
and
you
it's
want
certainly
to refresh
light.
your screen? So right now you got the question slide still up. I'm just.
Yeah.
We do have another question. We do have a question from Hogarth Astrophotography for you, Chris, saying, I've got both your books, A Practical and Scientific Approach to Deep Sky Imaging and Capturing the Universe. Are you working on a new book?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'm working on a completely new book. New because I want to give myself the option of going to a different publisher. So there's a difference between copyright and publishing rights. So if I use any content from the old books, I can't go to a different publisher. I've taken a bit of a rain check on it because the current books are selling pretty well. So it would be sacrificial to their sales if I brought out another book. So I'm going to I'll probably be publishing in about 2 years' time. You'll probably be in print in 2 years' time. The biggest problem for me is if I want to put practical examples in, it takes me a long time to get enough images under my belt, fresh images, in order to write about them. So when you go to Focal Press and they say, you want a cover image, can you give us 24 cover images, to choose one for the front cover? I said, I can give you 1 of 3, because otherwise you wait 5 years for me to do the 24 images. Because they're used to photographers going into a studio or somewhere just rattling off images, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to introduce lots of new technology.
Weather.
It is pretty fickle. I wish I'd taken up fishing some days.
Tell me, you and I are probably in this. Actually, all 3 of us are probably in the same boat with the weather.
With weather and everything.
When I used to travel to Dearborn, when I worked for Ford, the sky was never blue. It was always sort of a grey colour. So I don't know if it gets any better towards the lakes, but it just the dust in the sky must have been extreme.
Yeah. Yep. It's like that's like Long Island for you. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Pretty ugly.
Yeah.
Now
that's why I think we're both on the narrowband trail for the most part. At least Chris and I are mostly there. Eric's
I saw you
sponsored
by the way.
What was that?
I saw you're sponsored by Optolong.
Yep.
You need to be very careful with Optolong filters. Their quality control is a little bit haphazard at times. I've got a set of Astrodons, and I bought some Optolongs, and I had some very, very strange results. And then I measured their actual center wavelengths and efficiencies, and I thought that my measurements were wrong, but they were on the wrong wavelength, and the actual pass band was like 30% rather than like 90%. I think they messed up the coatings completely on them. But interestingly, when I looked at the Astrodon website, they actually stated virtually almost verbatim what I discovered. They didn't mention any names by name, but they said that a number of Chinese filter manufacturers were knocking out filters very, very low cost, but their quality was random. So I thought that was guff until I saw it myself. And maybe the next batch will be fine. But
Yeah, I've been using
Yeah.
Optilong for a couple of years, and I know a lot of other people that have used them as well. And in all fairness, the 6.5 and 7 nanometer narrow bands, not
Yeah.
that great.
Yeah, that's where I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I'll tell you that the 3s that they have now are pretty
Yeah.
decent. They're pretty decent.
Okay.
But the
Yeah.
6.5 and the 7s have a lot of haloing, especially obviously in the
Yeah.
03.
Well,
But
the interesting thing was, if you held the Astrodons up to the sky, you know,
yeah, I know where you're
during
going.
daytime, you hold up your filter wheel and look at the daytime sky, and you can see through the Astrodon, and you do it on the Optilongs, and you just see a reflection of your face.
Yep.
You think, hang on a minute, why can't I see red light coming through the red filter?
Yep.
And yeah, very strange.
Yes, but the 3s have been very good. I've been using the 3s for about 4 months, and they're great. And they actually gave us a set of the 3s to give away. So,
oh, that's good to know. Okay. I mean, the nice thing about 3s over 5s is you reduce the amount of light pollution, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Bortle 8.5 or worse on Long Island, and it's been great using them. I mean,
yeah,
it's been really good.
Now, Chris, one of the things I was curious, since do you mainly use monochrome, or have you done any one-shot color astrophotography?
I have. So I have done one-shot color. So this image here is one-shot color when it comes up. I'm back to slow again. I bought one-shot color cameras when I was writing the beginner's book, because I thought that's how they might start off. And the camera I bought has the same sensor as my Fuji XT camera, same Sony sensor. So it was interesting. What I did was, because obviously for the dark slides, it doesn't matter that it's a different type of Bayer array. I looked at the noise coming off the cooled camera from the XT camera, and it was a huge difference in noise, which is quite interesting. And because the Fuji doesn't have any fancy interface, I wrote a simple ASCOM camera driver for it that just basically flipped a switch, and there you go. It's going to come up now in 2 seconds.
So the Heart and Soul Nebula, you did the
that was a QHY 247C, which is a color APS-C camera, which uses the same sensor as my Fuji camera. Yeah, it's a good little camera. I personally wouldn't use them generally because of the light pollution around here. If you do the math, depending on which narrowband you're looking at, it's less efficient or equivalent efficiencies using monochrome in any time span. So if you say I've got 2 hours to do imaging, it is less efficient on reds and sulfurs and reds. But you could argue that 03 hits both blue and green pixels on a color camera, but at a lower efficiency. And in actual fact, it works out about the same. But anything with prominent HA, it's so much better using a monochrome from an efficiency standpoint. Any other questions?
I was kind of curious, your opinion on these newer multi-band pass, dual, tri, quad color, quad narrow band filters. What was your opinion on those?
What you're looking at is one. This is a duo. This is an STC duo narrowband filter.
Okay.
And so it has fairly broad narrowband pass for 03 and one for hydrogen alpha, which doesn't distinguish between hydrogen alpha and hydrogen beta or whatever. It just goes through a lot. So I think it's probably about 10 nanometers wide or something like that.
Okay.
Right.
But with the light pollution where I am, it's it's not ideal for, you know, taking out the sky noise. If I was in a dark site, I probably use them more frequently, especially if I was doing Milky Way shots and things like that. And I have got.
There's always that discussion of using, at least from my understanding, and you know, with new imagers, using a one-shot color in these dual band, tri-band. You know, it's supposed to help with this, you know, combating, you know, that light pollution and everything, you know, and especially, you know, with city skies, you know, everybody say, you know, at least from what I've heard, it's been more prevalent out there to say, hey, use one-shot color and use these multi-band, you know, these dual band or tri-band filters in these highly polluted areas or highly lighted polluted areas. So I wanted to get your opinion on that.
I would use the difference using this tri-band filter or duo-band filter was I was using on an Astro camera, which didn't have an infrared blocking filter. So that was fairly efficient. If I used it on a conventional, you know, mirrorless or digital SLR, the efficiency at HA and S2 is quite a bit lower because of the infrared blocking filter in front of the Bayer array. So the other alternative, which you can do, which you get reasonable results, I bought a cheap Fuji A7, XA7, which had been modified, had the infrared filter, blocking filter removed completely, but a piece of glass in the way instead. And that's far more sensitive to infrared and reds. So I use it dual purpose as an infrared black and white camera for pictorial use, but also use it for astro as well. That these modern cameras have built-in intervalometers, so you can basically tell it to take, you know, 130-second exposures and just let it go on. Nice. So I've done Milky Way shots like that, and it'll pick out a bit of nebulosity along the way. Yeah, there's some interesting sensors coming on. One of the things just to watch out for with sensors, there's a lot of debate about whether, when you calibrate a CMOS sensor, whether you use bias to calibrate the flats or whether you use darks to calibrate flats. And the problem is you've got to step back from the problem that says CMOS cameras are not all the same. Some are worse than others, or some have different attributes to others. Some have amp glow, some don't. Some have a non-linear relationship of dark levels. They do internal dark compensation. Others don't. So I came up with a general purpose calibration routine that would work with every camera, including CCDs, but it does use dark flats. But you know, some say, well, I don't want to do dark flats. You know, I'll just use biases. But when you're doing a narrowband exposure from an electroluminescent panel, sorry, not dark, flat exposures of electroluminescent panel, my exposures can be 30 seconds long, and with a 30-second long exposure, I'm starting to see amp glow. So I want to take out that amp glow with a dark, not with a bias.
Right.
So you've got to be a bit. I prefer to think of the broader community when I make a recommendation that will work more of the time rather than in a specific case.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
We had a question. I guess I'm not sure if this was a question for you, Chris, or just a general question for the audience. A blue, red, green bear matrix for Astro would be great, or maybe red, blue, green.
Yeah, so because our eyes are more sensitive to green, they always put twice as many green pixels in than red or blue in a Bayer array. And that's also another reason why when you do astro pictures, thankfully green doesn't appear as a very common color in astro pictures. There's lots of little tricks and tips that allow you to remove green pixels from an image because they shouldn't be there. Bayer arrays, unfortunately, are designed for conventional photography, so they'll always have two greens for every red and blue. And in fact, Fuji sensors are even worse. They have even more green pixels in proportion to the red and blue. The X-trans Bay array is even worse. So yeah, they're great for foliage.
But other than that,
yeah, I mean, I like Fuji cameras and I love their lenses, but they're okay. At a pinch, I'll use them for astro, but I wouldn't use them for anything serious.
Yeah,
sure.
But if I was in a really dark site, it's different. You know, a friend of mine helped me with some pictures from the Canary Islands, and he had a full frame Sony camera, but it was beautifully dark sky, so he was able to take very short exposures, and so therefore exclude a lot of sky noise and dark noise.
That's awesome. It should be.
I'm not sure. Al Need was also asking why such long flats. What is the advantage?
Well, it's just to get enough signal. So electroluminescent panels typically don't give off much deep red color. So in actual fact, I've stopped using electroluminescent panels for flats recently, and I've switched to a T-shirt over the end of the. I do want my flats within the observatory, not the sky, because I've got refractors. It tends to be fairly constant. I just do it the once, and it's good for quite a few months. So I put a T-shirt over the end of the telescope, but I put an LED array strip that's used for growing crops. So you see them on Amazon and such, but they're wideband. They go all the way to the infrared, ultraviolet all the way through to the infrared, and they've got an array of different LEDs. So I just use these. You can regulate them, and they have much greater in proportion of hydrogen alpha and sulfur 2 wavelengths than an electroluminescent panel.
That's interesting.
That's interesting. So you're saying some of the the LEDs that we use for just like say our hydroponic gardens.
That's it. That's what they're used for, and they have a little regulator and a timer on them, and so yeah, I just use it, and they come with magnetic feet. So I just put magnetic feet on the wall of the observatory. So I've got 2 strips down the wall of the observatory, white sheet over the end of the telescope. Happy days.
Interesting.
And it's USB powered as well, which is handy.
Nice.
Don't need an extra power supply.
Very interesting.
And because it's
USB
powered,
those are relatively inexpensive. Those LED strips.
Oh, they're very cheap. Yeah, about $20.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Cool. All right. Well, coming up on 4 o'clock, it looks like.
Yeah.
2 hours. That's been a great show. Absolutely.
Yes, it has.
You know, so that I don't see any other questions in the chat.
No, I don't.
We had about 22 people max, right? And not bad for a Saturday afternoon. That's literally a nice day, at least in my neck of the woods. It's
sure
hot but nice. It's 92 degrees in New York, but I just think it's interesting. You got some really good stuff, really good information, great images. I want to thank you for coming down and hanging out with us for a couple hours.
Yeah, on the Saturday. Yeah,
sure.
On
a Saturday.
Thank you.
But that being said, I guess if there's any more questions out in internet land, throw them on out. And other than that, everyone's saying thank you, Chris. I learned a lot. Great presentation. Thank you for the pictures.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I just hope Beta and 10 Micron aren't watching.
Well, the thing is, you never know. Have a rep that you never know. There may be a rep or somebody who's familiar with that. You can share it with them. So you never know.
Well, yeah, it's not just those experiences are not just singular ones; they're multiple ones. So
no, and that's one of the things we do on the show. We don't only just talk about things that we want to remove the bumps in the road if we can. With other people, and the only way we could do that is share our experiences, whether they're good or bad. And if somebody's watching and they don't happen to like, hopefully they come out and reach out to us and say we didn't like what you said, but then we could give them the reasons why.
When I worked in Ford, I know in the States everyone's either a GM guy, or a Chrysler guy, or a Ford guy, typically, you know. But they're
I'm
all
a
very
Toyota
simple.
guy personally.
Oh, go away. But the thing is that we all try to accomplish the same thing. We don't set out to make unreliable vehicles.
Right.
But with 3,500 components on a vehicle, and made in the way they're made, it's impossible not to have problems.
Exactly.
But it's the way you deal with those problems and fix those problems that counts just as much as not making them in the first place.
Agreed.
So when any problem occurs, and a developer basically sticks their head in the sand and says, I'm not doing anything because my design's perfect, that is a person you want to avoid, in my opinion.
I agree.
So when you create a Losmandy saddle tightening knob that you physically can't tighten enough with your hands because it's too slippery,
Or too
and
small.
instead they insist you somebody in their own time comes up with a 3D printed spanner to make their knob work.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
That says you can work out where that one's going. You'd say, well, why didn't that manufacturer put a little hole in the side you can put a jemmy bolt in? Or so, their design is not fit for purpose.
Yep.
That's arrogance.
Yep. Al Need said, well, looks like AstroWorld's not getting a beta sponsor. So there you go.
Customer satisfaction is very important. I mean,
it is. And,
it is very important.
And when you're on the leading edge of technology, it's even more sensitive to things going wrong. And you have to realize that the way that you use equipment, the way I use it, and where everyone else on the line uses it is all different.
Yeah.
And you have to listen to people. Yes, 50% of what people complain about is probably their own problem. But in that 50% that remains is something that you could do to improve it. Either make the instructions clearer, make the software better, or improve the quality of the manufacture.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is true.
Sure. That is very true.
What is it? RTFM.
Yeah, that's me. That's my middle name. I don't do it well either.
No.
Sometimes the manuals are tough to get through.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're tough to get through, man. I mean, sometimes you just can't even read them at all.
Or sometimes you're a goof like me, and you didn't realize that, hey, there's a manual that says, hey, remove this piece.
Yeah, and it ends up in the closet of death, just like everything else.
Then it says, hey, Eric, if you really want to do astro imaging on this thing, you need to remove this little, this little
spacer, little spacer here.
Well, I'll leave you. Just to prove that we can all cock up things beautifully. I'll leave you with this little story before I sign off. So I bought a new refractor, and I wanted to test it out. So I stuck it quickly on a tripod, and just on a normal photographic tripod, and just chucked. It was a bright star due south. Pointed it due south and looked at it. It was a bloody orange oval, and I'm thinking that the astigmatism on this telescope is rubbish. And it's only about 500 mil focal length. It wasn't anything great, and I just stuck an ordinary DSLR on the end of it. And I came back and thought, that's rubbish. I'll have to do some more testing. And then 2 days later, I realized I've been looking at Saturn.
That's awesome. That is so funny.
That's awesome.
And you know what? It happens. I made a quick 1 minute video of like some little things, like not to get frustrated over astrophotography, and little things that some of us just do, and we laugh about it. We don't tell anybody about it. We don't tell anybody we forgot to take the lens cap off, or forgot to turn something on, or plug the USB.
Take the Batinov mask off.
Take the Batinov mask off. I mean, it's all these little things that happen, and it's kind of like those dirty hidden secrets that like astrophotographers don't like to talk about.
Yeah. Well, we have all been there. We've all done that.
And we've all done it. It's just we won't admit it.
Well, I think it brings us together by admitting our faults, because we learn by them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we do.
Anyway, take care, gentlemen.
All right,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you
Have
so
a good
much.
night. Thank you for coming down and hanging out with us, Chris. Sorry. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. That was good. That was a good show.
Let me see if I could do this real quick, and I'm going to make my Phantom 2 up. And 1 second, layers, and we'll change this to Eric. And it's going to be a little weird looking, but this is what I did on the fly last night, and there we go.
Okay.
so yeah,
pretty colors.
well, you know what? It's a default on. I just had to do it really quick, and they had a default for a 2-up, so I just used it. I was like, all right, whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, great show. We thank you to Chris to come out and hang out with us. It was really fun having people out there that just want to come on the show. So it was great. Yeah. I got a phone call from Pete Meyer at AIC while we were online. I said, Pete, I'm on the show. You know. But yeah, so I mean, it was good. It was a lot of fun.
It was good.
Yeah.
I'm glad I was able to make this one.
Yeah, no. Hey, listen, the more the merrier, man. But you know, I don't mind flying solo, but you know, I need my goose, man.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm not gonna hit the canopy. I'm sorry. I'm not hitting the canopy.
No. Don't worry, and I won't pull it either. But yeah,
this was good. This was a good Saturday show.
Yeah, Saturday. I mean, we had 22 people come on Saturday afternoon, which was nice. So
I appreciate everybody hopping on and spending their Saturday afternoon with us. So.
No, we're not at AIC. I could not make it this year. Pete Myers is there now. And that's the only AstroWorld representation that we have over at AIC. It was nice to have some anyway. I'm sure Pete's talking about the show like crazy over there. So he loves doing this, and he loves the show, and he loves promoting. So yeah. But yeah.
No,
all right.
And we appreciate we appreciate all the support.
Yeah,
you know.
Absolutely.
So thank you all.
So all right. Eric, thank you for coming on. I guess that's it. So everybody have a good night. We will be back on Wednesday with Kurt Lanes, and he will be talking to us about his new roll-off roof project, and that's going to be a lot of fun to kind of.
That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to that because you and I have been talking about.
Eric and I are ready to pull the trigger on this whole thing, and it's going to give us some ideas. So hopefully we'll all use the proper J bolts and won't have to smash anything. And we learn as we do. So that's it. So come on Wednesday night. We'll be back. I'm going to be replaying this. I don't know. Either Monday or Tuesday night. I'll replay it at nighttime, and I'll just download it and just play the whole thing in its entirety. So yeah. So everybody enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks for coming out and hanging out with us on the Saturday AstroWorld afternoon special. And thank you again to Chris for coming down. Enjoy your weekend. Be safe. And we'll see you on Wednesday night. Have a good night, everybody. Hey.
Take care. Clear skies,
have a good day, everybody.
Yeah, have a good weekend. There's no clear skies here, but hopefully you guys
I got clear skies tonight. I got clear skies.
Well, you have fun.
It's 95 degrees and 89% humidity. So there you
go. Hey, get that dew controller rolling.
Oh, yeah. Here we go. Good night, guys.